So now I'd like to just go ahead and introduce Kevin Heffernan, who is the Invasive Species Coordinator for the Natural Heritage Program, and that is part of the Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation. Kevin is a lifelong biologist, and he's got a lot of stuff he'd like to share with you today. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so he can share his. Kevin, ready to share?
Queuing it up. All right. Does it look right on your end?
Nope. So you probably need to do presenter.
It was ready 2 minutes ago.
Yeah, I know. So now, yeah, we can see all
Let's
um,
see.
your
How do I
thing. So if
get
you got any
out of it?
questions for us, please put it in the Q&A tab. So you might want to go back to um,
Let's see.
your regular
I'm gonna
thing.
open up the. Okay, how do I have two instances of that open?
Hi, Hanover, Virginia.
Oh, I
Nice to see
see.
you,
I'm
Karen.
seeing the. I'm not sure. I'm gonna close both those.
Yeah, sometimes it's just easier to start again.
Oh, they won't let me close. All right.
Oakton, Virginia. Patrick Springs, Virginia. I've never heard of that. That sounds like a beautiful place. Williamsburg, that's where I went to college. Welcome, everyone.
I think I'm down to the right one.
Yeah, so once you share your the slides, and then you can probably just toggle onto the different views at the very top of your screen once you do that. So just go ahead and share your screen and
Yep,
then,
that looks right. And I
okay.
did this. Then I did one more thing. Does that look right now?
Yes.
What
So
about
just,
now?
yes,
Okay,
perfect.
good.
Okay,
All right.
great. I'm going to turn myself off so you can start talking.
All
Welcome.
right. Thank you, Rowena. Thank you, Natalie and Lauren, and the whole and Rod and the whole Blue Ridge crew for inviting me to give this talk. I'm very excited about it. It's something I've been doing and working on for a very long time, and I know people have a lot of questions. Particularly if your favorite invasive species is not on our invasive species list, or if your favorite backyard garden species is on our list, you might have a problem with it. But hopefully this will clarify how species get on the list or don't make it on the list. Um, as Rowena said, I work for the Department of Conservation and Recreation for the Natural Heritage Program. Um, my great grandfather and grandfather were in the green industry, so things I say about non-native plants, I'm not a purist, and I'm not against non-native plants. I wouldn't be here without them, literally. So, and that's true for all of us. Um, I just wanted to say a few quick things about the Virginia Natural Heritage Program in case you're not familiar with it, and kind of what we do. We're the biodiversity agency in the Commonwealth, and we do a lot of work to do biological inventory, data management, environmental review, land protection, and stewardship across the Commonwealth. We are also not a regulatory agency, so all this is mostly focused work on DCR lands, but like environmental review, we're giving our free advice. Well, not free, but our hard-won advice for projects of various kinds. Land protection is about protecting land. Stewardship is stewardship. So inventory biologists comb the state, literally looking under every rock and into sinkhole ponds and caves and the barrier islands, and like we keep very detailed records on all our finds. This is what they used to look like. Now they look like this. And then all that gets wrapped up in one way or another, kind of culminates in land acquisitions or dedications or conservation easements across the Commonwealth. We currently have 68 natural area preserves protecting about 70,000 acres. Many of those places you can visit, so look that up if you're interested. Once we acquire these lands, then we usually set them on fire and then spray herbicides on them. That's a lot of what's involved in doing restoration work and protecting the rare, threatened, endangered species we acquire these lands for. So that's it in a nutshell. I'm going to keep moving. the big question we have is, what are invasive species? Today, we're especially going to be talking about what is an invasive plant or how to be an invasive plant. But first, we have to ask a bunch of other questions to get to that final question of what is an invasive plant. And first, we have to ask, what are native species? And so if you're talking about this creature, so for example, you might think, oh, yes, that's a native species. True, but only if you're talking about Virginia and much of North America, some of Central America, Mexico, and then, but not all of Alaska. So guess what? Our national symbol is not covering the entire range of our nation. Species don't care about political boundaries, and often we ignore that fact. So native species are species that have evolved within a naturally bounded range and without human intervention. By the way, this is a short period of time to give this talk, and I usually like to be more conversational. This is going to be kind of a fire hose of information. Again, you'll be able to reach out to me, to Blue Ridge staff, and all of this is going to be a technical report in the coming months that you will be able to get from us. So stay tuned. So the next question, what are introduced species? For example, our beloved cows that provide so many food and other products for us, introduced to North America. Originally, almost all our cattle in North America are derived from this creature, the auroch, which its native range was an incredible range across Eurasia, kind of the Eurasian buffalo, and went extinct in the 17th century, but gave us all our modern cattle except for a few other subspecies that are used in other parts of the world. So introduced species are species that were moved by humans, not by their own power. I'll talk more about that later, from their native range into a new range, intentionally or accidentally. And you can probably think of a variety of your invasive species that some you may know came intentionally. Hello, English ivy, I'm looking at you. And some that came accidentally, like wavy leaf grass. What are naturalized species? All these are important terms to differentiate any species we look at and help us understand what our concerns should be vis-a-vis management. So a naturalized species, here is the honeybee, and sometimes people call it the domesticated honeybee. It's not domesticated, it's a wild creature. It will sometimes put up with us, but it is completely capable of living on its own on the wild, but we did introduce it to North America. Its former range of the species that make up the honeybee complex were really centered in Southeast Asia and then spread by humans basically all over the planet, I guess, except Antarctica and Greenland. So a naturalized species are species introduced species that then escape human control and populate and reproduce in the introduced range on their own. So they go wild, they jump the fence, they take off, they're out of here. How about then this species, which you can probably recognize just by the structure it's imposing on this landscape? This, of course, is our iconic kudzu, which is an introduced species in North America, jumped the fence, became a naturalized species, and then wreaks havoc. And here you can see many layers of havoc going on here. One, it is completely transformed this probably former pasture, which is no longer functional as pasture, therefore an economic damage. It has transformed this house. Can you see the house there? No longer a house, no longer an economic asset, so damaging to economic resources, but also damaging to these natural resources of the surrounding forest. Climbing and crawling into that forest and creating a whole new structural layer overtopping the very trees in that forest and creating many layers of damage by basically outshading, outcompeting all those species below it. So complete transformation, which leads us to Well, here's a little bit more about the kudzu range. Here was its natural range in East Asia, Japan, Korea, parts of China, Southeast Asia. So again, these questions we go through to get to an invasive species, and these are just the beginnings of the questions. What is a native species? What are introduced, naturalized, and invasive? So keep those terms in mind for this definition then. Invasive species are introduced species accidentally or intentionally by human activity into a new range and cause or have the potential to cause ecological or economic harm or direct harm to humans. And on that note, that can even include plants. If you don't know this plant, you should learn it. It is giant hogweed, and it is worse than poison ivy because the toxin in that plant will persist in your skin for some time, and every time you're in the sun, it will erupt again in dermatitis. Bad plant. So direct harm to humans. So bad in other ways too. Fortunately, we do not have this in Virginia at this time. We found a few cultivated instances of it, curiously, because humans, and but not a problem in the landscape. All right. Just a quick note on the economic harms. This is a very generalized, big scale look at invasive species generally. This number is the global dollars per year of damages, costs, losses to invasive species. In the US, it's around 23 billion, and that's again for all species, not just plants. In this data, management costs are a very small percentage of these costs. And not, these high costs aren't out there because high-end biologists are doing invasive species work. It's because the damages are to other things: crop losses, timber losses, property value losses, on and on, things like that. The management cost in this figure is a small percentage. I think it's 17% of the total. So the authors of this study suggested that more management might help us save dollars on the other end. So more investment in management might save us a lot of the losses we're seeing from invasive species. Invasive species also play a role in 60% of our extinctions at this time. And this is from a big study you can look up and enjoy on your own. I'm going to skip on through these. This is sort of the cut for the US. This is from a period of time from 1960 to 2017. And yes, that is $1,260 billion. And in recent years, the past 10 years, it's been that $23 billion a year figure. So a question you might have had and wondered about, and maybe or maybe not answered: why is this whole invasive species thing happening? To quote Taylor Swift, "Hi, it's me. I'm the problem. It's me. It's us. It's human beings." Once upon a time, this earth was largely bounded, and these various natural barriers like oceans, large river systems, mountain ranges, deserts, slowed species progress around the globe or into new habitat. And that happens at many different scales, species movement, as you know. But largely over a long, slow period of time. So life has been evolving on Earth for like 3.5 billion years. And that's a long, long time. And I think we don't appreciate fully how long this time span has been. If this is one day in the life of life on Earth, this sliver here is human activity, human beings out and about. And as it came to be passed, moving things about. Teeny tiny sliver. So the rate of change we are imposing on the Earth is really rather like a meteor strike, although extended over centuries. So you can see back here, 1750, all these changes progressing and speeding up to our current era. One figure they don't have in here is like the rate of species movement. I'll be talking about that in there, but here's species extinctions, and here's human population, and Here's the rise of motor vehicles, and you can draw your conclusions from all that. Um, and this is why I still like the word Anthropocene, even though geologists are sort of officially dissing that as a geological term. But I think it profoundly represents our massive impact on Earth, and all systems on Earth, and that this is a process that is affecting millennia and more beyond our time. So we are basically a geologic process plus. So again, once upon a time, all these separations, even distant, remote, teeny new islands out in the Pacific, eventually over hundreds of thousands or millions of years would get life. Although a teeny South Pacific island like this would never get elephants, but it would get a lot of green plants, other small species, birds, insects, and the like. But one species came along, and that was us, and we got very good at moving stuff about. Um, and wherever we'd go, we would take all our stuff with us. So even as we were leaving Europe behind to found the New World, we dragged a bunch of stuff with us. And some of that stuff, good, and we're glad it's here. A lot of that stuff was unintentional, house sparrows, starlings, all kinds of things came with us. For many centuries, there were still a lot of barriers, not only the oceans, but storms, dragons, sea monsters, giant fish for some reason. But now we're incredibly efficient at moving massive amounts of material around the Earth. This is just one container ship. The big container ships now, I'm told, and this is an old number, so I could be wrong, but it's something like 11,000 to 15,000 containers per ship. So you think about all that mass moving around. There's going to be a lot of accidental introductions along with the intentional, but generally we're just interested in stuff, moving stuff around. So a little sidestep here to another aspect of our global life on Earth. And this is for any nursery folks in the audience here that maybe are upset with our list and maybe wonder what they would ever do if they can't sell English ivy or calorie pear. Well, here's the good news, friends. There are 400,000 species of vascular plants on Earth, so we can find some other lovely plants for our backyards that are not invasive. And that number's always kind of going up as we discover new species, but then, yes, some species going extinct. But anyway, that's a lot to work with. Just takes a little time and effort to determine maybe what is better to bring here versus what we have been bringing here. Currently in North America, my understanding of the flora, that is all the plant species in the wild reproducing on their own. That is the native and naturalized species. So native and the introduced naturalized. This does not include necessarily corn or tulips, but it does include calorie pear and then all the wild native stuff we know and love. So that's go. Something's happening here. Something's blocking there we go. Plant species in the North American flora. And so that does include the naturalized. Okay, so this is a number I've had for a long time, and I recently went back to try to find my original source, and I can't find it, but I'm finding other numbers that still make me feel like this is a pretty safe number. And this number is plant species that have been introduced to North America since European colonization began. The two sources I found rediscovered put it at 25,000 plants introduced to Florida and 3,000 plants to California. And those numbers seem questionable to me, but I think they're probably underestimating. And anyway, it's lots more than our natural native flora by at least double, if not more. So again, remember those container ships and all that they're moving. Right now, our understanding of our North American flora is around 5,000 introduced species. Here and there, you might find a species that's argued about, was it here, is it introduced? But for the most part, it's around 5,000 plus or minus. species that are introduced and reproducing on their own. And the vast majority of those are not a concern, either because they're not a concern or we haven't figured out what the concern is. So for me, I believe they're sort of innocent until proven guilty, but there's a lot of evidence we can gather to know if they're guilty of being invasive. All right, so right now around 500 species are considered by somebody or another invasive, and I would call that a conservative number, and I think the conservative number is better because in my work and many other invasive species biologists, what we really want to say is you're going to call it invasive, you got to back that up with some evidence of harm. Harm is the key thing. It's not because it's not native. It's not because it's causing a problem in your yard. Although I love your yard and I want you to have a happy yard and garden, but all of that is not enough. And again, for us, for DCR, for natural heritage, our list focuses on natural areas and natural places, not just not so much yards or farms. That's a whole nother list we can talk about another day. Invasive plant species, again, 500. Current number for our flora of Virginia, 3,344 species, plus or minus. This is always fluctuating a little bit, but that's been a pretty solid 3,000 plus for quite a while. And of those, 755 are introduced and naturalized. So naturalized, introduced species of the flora, that is now about a little over a sixth of our flora. Other states aren't so lucky. Hawaii, 70% of their flora is introduced since colonization. Florida also has a much higher rate, and I can't remember what that is right now. Anyway, so and with all that as background, we look at our list of 103 species, which is the current 2024 update and DCR invasive plant list. That's a pretty small sliver of the 400,000 plant species on Earth, the 30,000 or so plants that have been brought to North America, and the 5,000 or so that have naturalized. And this number could go up over time. It could also come down. It kind of depends on a few things. But right now, we've been around 100, for 30 years. Some of the species have changed, but for the most part, it's around this number. And we'll go into more like how we get there in a moment here. All right. So this list also, I'll say, has a history like about 30 plus years now. I think it was 1992, the first DCR invasive plant list was published. That was a year before I came on the scene. And that was developed with what we call in the trade expert opinion. So a bunch of biologists sat around our table and talked about the species they were familiar with exhibiting what they thought of as invasive behavior on the ground and being the major problems. And they gave ranks to these, basically in a kind of panel form and committee or advisory group, and largely within natural heritage, but we also had Department of Wildlife Resources, I think forestry and agriculture, maybe some native plant society folks and Nature Conservancy in on that. And that produced a list of around 100. I can't remember what that first one was. But anyway, it's been on the scene for a while, and that started with this expert opinion. Now we do things a little differently. By a little, I mean a lot. And here's a roundup of some of the steps we went through in the last two rounds of updates for the invasive plant list. In 2001, I began introducing the use of a protocol developed by the Nature Conservancy to be a scalable protocol for assessing native plants at the national level, as well as regional, state, or even a locality. You can use the same protocol that I'll be discussing here in a few minutes to screen and rank your the invasiveness of a plant, and then decide what you're going to do about it from there. So overall process is in the background, what we're doing is reviewing local, state, and federal invasive species list and building a database of all these species and who thinks they're invasive where. And we really focus on the mid-Atlantic states as our kind of region of interest. Prior to this last update, I updated the protocol a bit from some lessons learned from a process some of us went through with the VDAC's Noxious Weed Advisory Committee, where we took our DCR protocol and then reviewed it, edited it, and made it work for listing or reviewing species to be considered for the noxious weed list. The noxious weed list then is a regulatory list, and I don't have time today to go into details about that, but their process started with using this, or they adopted our protocol as a major component of that assessment. So we had a good roundtable of people working on that, and I drew some lessons from that and adapted that into our protocol into our protocol. We looked at a lot of public and crowdsourced data like EdMaps and iNaturalist. We crosswalked our database with the Flora Virginia and the Digital Atlas of Virginia Flora, particularly to align nomenclature, that is the names, particularly the scientific names of species, which can make things confusing if you don't have a good handle on what something is called. We conducted some rapid reviews of species that people have been recommending to us or were coming up on other lists, but we didn't have any real information or didn't know if there was anything about them, particularly about them in Virginia. And that rapid review process is something I've formalized for internal use to help us take a quick look, but tracking our thinking as well as our sources for reviewing whether or not we're going to take the next step of assessing. Because as you'll see, the assessment process is arduous. So with this latest update, we had done 16 completely new assessments, and 13 of those qualified for adding to our list. And that came out last year. Was that like a year ago? About a year ago now. So let me take a sip here and take a pause and let you digest. Again, sorry for the fire hose, but I think we might actually get through it. So my wife comes home from the nursery. She loves planting. She's got a wonderful garden. She brings something home. She says, "Oh, look at this. I thought the color was cool and some interesting structure." And I'll be like, "Yeah, that does look interesting. I agree. But did you look at my list? Did you look at the DCR invasive plant list?" "Well, no." "Well, okay. Well, I don't recognize it. She doesn't recognize it. Is this plant an invasive plant? How do we figure that out?" And it's easy as this. If you're maybe you're getting a little milkshake freeze in your forebrain, don't worry. This is what I looked like before I developed this table. It's a lot of stuff going on, and developing this flow chart. And this has been through many rounds of kind of review and revision. This is a kind of maybe, I don't know, 30,000 foot view of the assessment process. And I'm not going to walk through every bubble here, but the main things I want to point out are when you have a species in hand, maybe you're in the nursery, or maybe you're in the wild and you're like, "What is this? I've never seen it." First thing you need to do is verify that the ID of that species and then consult either Flora of Virginia in the nifty $20 app you can get online now for whatever your device, or the Digital Atlas of Virginia Flora, which is free online. And it will tell you right away if it's known in Virginia and if it's native or not. Okay. And if it's there and it's native, no sweat. Don't sweat it any further. Enjoy it. If it's not on those lists, then we have to ask a bunch more questions. Or if it's not native on those lists, we ask more questions. Is it already on the invasive plant list? It may be there already. If yes, get to work if that's your property. If no, then we have to ask more questions. Yeah, in the end, I don't think we'll answer everybody's questions because all this leads to more questions. However, so the next questions are, does that species exhibit invasive characteristics? And there are so many people now looking at things, it's almost certain that you are not likely to be the first person to find an invasive species. Other people have recognized it. They may not have recognized it as invasive, but they've probably posted it to iNaturalist or something like that, or EdMaps, or there are a sadly dwindling species of botanists that just look for new stuff all the time. Maybe somebody in the audience today will be the next generation of those folks. If it does not exhibit invasive characteristics, then again, let's not worry about it. But if it does, then we're going to have to conduct a risk assessment. Um, and the components of that are basically looking at, does it have suitable habitat in Virginia? Does it threaten natural resources? Again, here, not so much your lawn. They may impact your lawn. They may impact your garden. They may impact your local park. But that is not my primary concern with this list. And then can the species, so once you know whether or not, does it threaten natural resources? No. We then just track it in a database. Like, we've got this report, somebody saw it somewhere, maybe not in a garden, maybe in a garden, but maybe not in a garden. And somebody was worried, they saw it coming up in the sidewalk cracks, or they found it on the edge of a new development or whatever, maybe going into the woods. We'll keep track in a database and just keep adding information until we get enough to make us concerned about doing an assessment. After that, if it is showing threatening behavior to natural resources, we ask, can the species be eradicated or can it be managed? So if it can be eradicated, we want to put it on the early detection list, get the word out, get it on the VDAC noxious weed list, and various other things to get as much resources and people on that species as soon as possible to try to stop it. And yes, there are a few instances where we did actually stop things. And if it can't be eradicated, it may just go onto the list, and it still may go onto the noxious weed list as well. If it is not being sold in the nursery trade. If it is sold in the nursery trade, we cannot list it as a noxious weed. I am not going to talk anymore about that today. So what does our invasive plant risk assessment protocol look like? It looks like this, and you should really be feeling a little bit of milkshake brain freeze at this point. A spreadsheet with tiny lines of text is terrible. But for the noxious weed assessment, we did create kind of an online tool. If you're interested in checking that out, you can go to the VDAC site and check out the online noxious weed tool. But read the instructions carefully and don't submit anything you haven't done serious work on, but you could still work through it and get an appreciation for what that work is like. So anyway, basically the protocol is made up of 22 questions, 2 screening questions and 20 further questions in 4 categories that I'll discuss here. We also, along in this particular file I have here, it's showing some of the distribution and abundance slide maps that we have access to. And then here's a kind of close-up where you can maybe better see some of the questions. Again, all this will be published in a technical report in coming months, and you'll be able to get your hands on all this. Anyway, I'm also, anyone wants to reach out and maybe participate in this kind of thing, we can talk. But it's an art. I mean, it's an art and a science, and it takes a lot of time. Not to discourage you, but so 4 categories: ecological impact, current distribution and abundance, trend in distribution and abundance, and management difficulty. And then under each of those, there's something like 5 or 6 questions in each of those categories. They have multiple choice answers that we get from our fully written out protocol. And depending on the answer you select, that will get a weighted score. So A is usually something like 15 or 30 points, and D will be 1 or 5. There's even a U for unknown. Sometimes we just don't know. Here's a couple answers for you, given U, and that gets no scoring. So, but as a placeholder, I'm pointing out that we have holes in our knowledge about things, which is the way of things. So, screening questions. Let's come back up to these here. Qualifying questions. Is the species in question non-native, established outside of cultivation, in or near Virginia? And by near, again, I mean mid-Atlantic states. If yes, you can proceed to question 2. Does it occur in natural habitats in Virginia? If yes, you can proceed with the assessment. If no, this is just not a concern for our list and for our the reasons for developing this list. Yeah, so yard weeds, garden weeds, agricultural weeds, those are covered more by for VDACs, Virginia Agriculture and Consumer Services folks, and we do not have the bandwidth for covering all those other kinds of habitats. It's hard enough just looking at natural areas. So I'm not going to go into each and every one of these questions. I want to look at the higher order level of the questions as we've organized them under these categories. So this is also, part of what we do. This is more of what we do. Let me go back here. So we'll look at these higher categories and I'll give you a taste of some of the pieces of information, and as well as where do we get this information. And a lot of this information for us now in Heritage, a lot of it comes from our regional stewards, but it also comes from scientific literature, gray literature, other agency information, personal communications with people in the state, in other states, in federal agencies. And we do a lot of review of scientific literature to understand each of these species as we go forward in developing the assessment. And all that gets recorded in the assessment. And to me, this is the most important thing of the assessment. Does the assessment give us a perfect, absolute, objective, final answer on a species? Probably not. But it gives us a trail, a paper trail, a thought trail of all the information we gathered, how we interpreted that information, and what result that gives us for our understanding at the moment of assessment. All right, so here are the components again: ecological impacts, current distribution and abundance, trends in distribution and abundance, and management difficulty. So ecological impacts include stuff like ecosystem processes, community structure, community composition, impacts on individual species. I'm rushing through this because I'm going to show it better in the next slide. Here's Phragmites australis. This is demonstrating all those things right there. All these impacts, ecological impacts, are evident in this one picture of Phragmites australis in the Virginia coastal plain, the major invasive species. So the impacts here are ecosystem processes it's messing with. It would be hydrology. It transpires. Oh, whoops! Just don't swipe on your touchpad. Transevaporation, moving lots of water into the air. It creates a dense overstory on top of everything else, and in that density creates a new fire regime that would be catastrophic in a drought year. It's changing community structure with that stature because it's taller than anything else in our marshes. And it's also grows more densely than most of its competitors. And then it's just adding new species to that composition and altering, the relationships between the different species out there. And then it does impact individual species anywhere it grows. It's just completely changing the habitat for everything out there. Phragmites will turn a marsh with 20 to 50 plus species of plants in a 100-meter area to 3 or 4, and the primary one being Phragmites. And then the other thing we look at as part of ecological impacts are conservation significance of the impacted species, like rare species, basically, or rare natural communities. All right, so continuing on to current distribution and abundance, a lot of what we do is just look at, first of all, Digital Atlas of the Flora of Virginia, which gives us a distribution, but these dots here really only represent presence of the species on all these counties. So it does tell us the distribution, tells us the range from the coastal plain to the mountains, but it tells you nothing about the density or abundance in any of these places. So it's hugely abundant. I can't believe I used that word, but it's a major invader of all our marshes in the coastal plain, and but really very sporadic out here. So that's just part of understanding the distribution. The part about understanding the abundance, you have to do a lot of field work, and in the case of Phragmites, I did that with 7 years of helicopter flights every summer, 40 to 120 hours in a helicopter, mapping all the Phragmites I could find in much of the coastal plain of the Eastern Shore, Southeast Virginia, Rappahannock, York watersheds. And we found over 15,000 acres of Phragmites in those places. And here's the map that resulted from that work just for Back Bay, North Landing River, Northwest River. And so this is what high quality abundance data looks like. And we don't often have that for many of the species we're looking at. We have to kind of conjecture that, but that's made, we make that point in our assessment. So trends then in a distribution abundance, then we have to kind of look at reports and try to track the history of something and how long it's been moving through a system. And in the case of Phragmites, we luckily did have a record going back to 1964 in Back Bay, which is the area I just showed you. In Southeast Virginia, there were 0 acres of Phragmites in a major 5-year study of vegetation in that area. But then about 17 years later, there were 85 acres reported by various federal agencies. Then those same agencies by 1990 reporting 1,000 acres. And then the result of my map there you saw a minute ago, about 6,000 acres in a 10,000 acre marsh. So you can see that trend in scientific terms is pretty bad. So that's the trend. And we don't always, again, have that strong record. We have to conjecture, get personal communication reports, kind of read the negative image of data that where things are just lacking and then they're appearing. So anyway, all that is noted in our assessments. So trends of distribution and abundance also includes, in that category in the assessment, includes a look at the reproductive characteristics. And this is really the core of how do you become an invasive species, invasive plant. Reproductive characteristics of a plant tells you a lot about how invasive it's going to be, particularly if you already know it's naturalized. So these are, and I'm going to go through this fast because I'm really out of time, but I'm going to get through this part and then the management section, and then we'll have questions. So reproductive characteristics, reproduces readily by seed, vegetatively, or spores. And just think of hydrilla. Hydrilla, I can't go into details, but it has 4 different ways of reproducing. Phragmites too, and many species produce superabundance of seeds compared to other plant species. Sometimes they reproduce more than once per year, multiple, episodes of flowering and the like. They grow rapidly. For example, Phragmites begins growing in the marshes in April and keeps on growing through October, even into November, as an example. Has seeds or spore that remain viable in the soil for 3 years or more. Some of us know we've been doing studies on things like stilt grass, which seems to have a soil viability for 10 years or more, and wavy leaf grass, it's at least probably 5, if not 10 years. Quickly spreading rhizomes, resprouts readily when cut, grazed, or burned, i.e. the easy ways you would think to control something. Sometimes plants just love what we do to them and want more of it. Burn me, cut me, graze me, I love it. Fragments capable of becoming established elsewhere. Phragmites, by the way, satisfied is checks off all these, has other comparable reproductive factors suggesting potential competitive advantages. And two things that are not on this list. One is, are humans interested in moving it, or just somehow accidentally endlessly moving it? And then, is it tolerant of a wide range of habitats, which, Phragmites is. So here you can see rhizomes spreading out. It also reproduces by seed. And you see over here, it's primarily reproducing vegetatively and spreads out from here and here and here and here. And what you have over 30 or 40 year period of time, you get this. This is Back Bay now, where it's probably 80 or 90% Phragmites in that 10,000 acre marsh, oligohaline marsh. And it is also, and this is what's missing on the reproductive characteristics, but it's picked up in other questions. Is it tolerant of a wide range of habitats? So I'm pretty sure these people didn't intentionally plant Phragmites in their pool. I think it flooded, sediment came in, and the Phragmites rhizomes came in, and it was quite happy in that ridiculous habitat. You can think of other species that satisfy many of these similar characteristics. We got the wavy leaf with its sticky little seed that takes rides on every living thing that comes brushing past. Two-horned trappa, which you probably have heard about, and has this clever little seed with its barbed little horns that hook onto all manner of human and non-human fibers and get moved. So that brings us to our last category, management difficulty. Questions in there range are about general management difficulty, minimum time commitment to control of species or eradicate it. And many of you are already familiar that it very frequently, it's a multi-year or more process. Impacts of management on other native species, and then accessibility of invaded areas. All those factor in to our final assessment. Here's an example of management not to do on invasive species, or rather, particularly Phragmites. Don't follow this example, and I'll never say whether or not that is me. I don't think so. I think I took that picture, but that is not the way to do it. We do it by air now. So I think I am going to stop here so we can have some questions. I hope I haven't fried out everybody's brain.
No, you had some really great great photos, information. Thank you, Kevin. So we do not have a ton of time left, and Natalie knows, and we actually didn't get that many questions in the Q&A, but we got a bunch from people who, when they were registering. So Natalie, can you ask Kevin the first question in the queue that you've got?
Yep. Let's see. Okay, so one of the questions is, besides focusing on eradication of invasive plants in alluvial riparian areas, would you say it is better to tackle large swaths of an invasive area or small manageable patches to keep them from becoming a large problem area? And
yeah, this is an ongoing kind of discussion, and always comes up. And generally speaking, depending on your resources, you want to go after those kind of pioneer patches and knock those down, because they're A, more manageable, and B, it will help to at least slow the spread. And then if and when resources come on where you can take on the larger swaths, then you take on those larger swaths. Phragmites is an example for us there. There's vast areas of Phragmites invasion that will probably never get any kind of treatment. We focus our treatment, of course, on our lands, which are designated for high priorities habitats already. So we try to do our best to control all of it, but we know even there, we can't get it all eradicated. We try to maintain biodiversity in those spaces and not let it turn to a giant frag patch, which is what will happen if you just let go of any control. It will just dominate. And I think that similarly happens with wavy leaf or trappa or other things that if you don't jump on those outliers, it's just going to keep going.
Thank you. Well, so I neglected to actually introduce the two other panelists, and they are Natalie, who you just heard from, Natalie Walker, who is one of our invasive management specialists, and she focuses on our Blue Ridge Prism's northern region, and also our executive director, Lauren Taylor's here. Lauren, did you have any questions you'd like to ask Kevin?
So let's see. Uh, One question is there any way for people to know what's in the pipeline? For example, two of the hawkweed species like Oriental hawkweed,
Mhm.
Jungia
Mhm.
japonica, or mouse-eared hawkweed, things that people are seeing that are exploding in population.
Mhm.
And related to that is when a plant hits your radar screen, approximately how long of a time does it take to go through this assessment process?
Mhm. So answer the first question. The pipeline is not really a public thing. It's an internal discussion thing. If you reach out and ask me about a species, I can give you an answer, but we don't generally just publish that. And then uh, the question about how long once we've decided, yes, we want to assess that. That question is changing, and now it's like we can pretty quickly, once we've decided, get on to an assessment because I have two new staff people. And so formerly I was a portion of a person, and now we have three full-time people working on invasive species um, in Natural Heritage Program. And we have other agencies with more staff as well. And we all have been helping out with noxious weed assessments, which is where a lot of my energy was going for a few years. And now we'll be focusing back on our invasive plant list. Um, so um, anyway, it depends on the species then, like how long, how many hours it's going to take, like once you start doing the assessment. It seems like if there's a lot of information, it sort of takes a medium amount of time. And if there's very little or a lot of information, it takes a very long time. So um, anyway, for my findings, my general sense of it is it's probably 24 hours per species to sit down, do the research, think about it, answer the questions, rethink about it, get those weighted answers, and then have some other people look at it and check your work. So um, that is a lot of time for one species. Yeah.
So someone just asked a question that I guess a lot of people wonder, Kevin, and is it even possible to actually eradicate an invasive species?
Good question. Yes, we've done it a couple times.
Really?
Yeah, so one instance was a pond was invaded by Salvia molesta. What is that? What is the common name? Salvia. It's a water fern. I can't believe I'm spacing
Keep
on that.
talking and I'll look it up.
Yeah. Salvinia molesta. And it was found in one pond in, I think, Highland County or maybe Augusta County, and eradicated there and has never returned since. Also, we've been pretty successful at virtually eradicating beach vitex on the coastal plain, which has become quite a problem in South Carolina, somewhat North Carolina, and it was sold in the trade here until they voluntarily stopped selling beach vitex. And we had some multi-agency programs, particularly led by VDAX and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, working in Virginia Beach and Norfolk to basically get it out of people's yards and dune frontal property areas. And now it's barely out there. So not 100% eradication, but it's not the kudzu-like problem on our frontal dune systems as it would be, and as it has been further south. Um,
Okay, so
mhm.
so that what I wrote, just I miswrote something then on chat, which was giant salvinia, which is what I think you were
Giant
trying to
Salvinia.
think
Yeah,
about, and
yeah,
beach vitex have both been eradicated in Virginia, but giant
yeah.
salvinia has, but you said beach vitex has been dramatically reduced.
Yes.
Okay.
Um, so those are two examples. And so, but generally, once they're established and widespread, no, as our current technology allows know. I mean, it's just so much human labor required, as well as other resources, as all of you already know. So here's an important thing for landowners to think about. What are your goals at your site? This is how we parse this question. What are your goals at the site? Are you trying to, maintain and protect a conservation area with high value conservation resources? That's our issue. So that means we throw a lot of effort into things, but are the particular species threatening those things? We go after those that are the primary threat. Another way you can look at it too is what species are not only highly impactful, but also manageable. Manage the species that are manageable and don't sweat it on the other ones. So kind of combining those various perspectives, you can get to a point where you don't have to worry about every non-native species on your property.
So that sounds like a formula for not driving yourself crazy with invasive.
Yes.
Is that right? So
Yeah.
you can live your day.
Yes. So again, majority of species that are naturalized, we don't know that they're any harm. And the other thing is, there's not a lot we can do about it.
Yeah.
About those, and particularly if they're not, coming up as a management issue, why would we spend time on them? So you got to be clear about your goals and, manage for what you want, not what you don't want. That's another axiom in the trade.
That's a really good point. So if you
Mhm.
want natives, manage your land for those specific natives that you want.
Yes.
Okay.
That will
Well,
likely give your place resilience to fight the non-native and the invasives also. So, yeah.
that sounds like another brown bag webinar. But
Yeah, could be.
anyway, well, thank you, Kevin. That was really informative, and I think most people stayed on throughout the whole webinar. So
Thank you.
yeah, your information was really interesting. And again, if you've got any more questions for Kevin, go ahead and email us and we can send them along his way. I know he'd be happy to answer them. We are out of time though. It is 1:01. So very quickly, I just want to thank you again, all of you for joining us. And I want to thank Lauren and Natalie for helping with this webinar. And of course, Kevin for giving the presentation. We are right in the middle of a major fundraising push, actually. Blue Ridge PRISM cannot survive without donations from our supporters like you. So if you are so inclined, we would love it if you would consider donating to Blue Ridge PRISM. You can donate to us at blueridgeprism.org/donate. That is on our website. And our website is www.blueridgeprism.org. Again, if you have any questions for us, go ahead and email us at info@blueridgeprism.org, and you can follow us on our different social media channels and volunteer by emailing us at that same address. The recording of this webinar will be emailed to you in a few days, so don't worry. If you weren't able to catch every single word of what Kevin said, you can watch it at your leisure. So I'll be sending this out to you in a few days, and just sit tight. And that's it. Thank you for sticking with us. It's only 1:02, so we only went 2 minutes over. There's going to be a short survey that pops up right after you leave, just to help us understand what you would like to see in the future and how we can better meet your needs. And we're really grateful for you for supporting Blue Ridge PRISM's education efforts, and grateful to grants like those from the Virginia Environmental Endowment for helping us with our outreach. So thanks so much, everyone. Thank you so much, Kevin. And we hope you enjoy your weekend.